have held a position of, and a spiritual position of rulership for some time, you really need to be coming in with something of far, far more higher and moving in that way. So it's quite laughable to me because I read a lot. I research a lot. I come from a very diverse background. So I was raised in a satanic cult, as you know.
Yeah.
So I was very much raised in that spirituality. Dealing with demons was my ABCs as a child, unfortunately. And later on in life, I moved into Christianity and started trying to deal with those things. The devastation it has on the life is quite phenomenal. So yeah, if you're going to go in and deal with those things, you really need to go in with a higher power, which is why the exorcists and those sorts of things, which probably have a bad name because of movies and stuff like that. Now, I'm not Catholic. I do exorcisms. I am a believer. And we do what we call deliverances as well, which is more like a minor exorcism.
Do you have a lot of those right now, though, for exorcisms, or a need for those right now?
This year, it has escalated phenomenally. I can't believe how much we've been getting this year. And that was sort of something we saw coming as well. We've seen it rising over the last 10 years. And I think because of the diversity in spirituality and because of there's so many different cultural things now, it's all mingled in, people tend to get inundated. And as I say, it does have an effect like too many cooks in the kitchen. Also, there's a lot of entities that play good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
And because our worship, our communion with these different spirits, our all of those sorts of things are a major factor in the spiritual realm. As I say, the soul is a commodity there. So if we're engaging an entity and we're really not aware of what it is and how it behaves, if it's not receiving what it believes should be received in worship, in offerings and those sorts of things, they will turn bad cop and they will go nasty in a way of trying to pull back the person into do as you're told.
I think people start to delve into the Ouija board when there's an unknown.
Yep.
They think, well, obviously we'll try and contact them or do something. We don't really need anybody to come in. We can deal with this themselves.
And that's actually a major problem. That's not that dealing with those things or trying to assist the deceased is a problem. A lot of people are hurting when they've lost their loved ones. Obviously, they need to have that assurance that their loved one are okay. The Ouija board in itself is to communicate with the ones that are deceased. The unfortunate thing about that, and something that the Catholic Church has tried to warn about for years and years and years, is that the deceased souls, like most of us who are not mediums or don't see the ones that have passed away, most of us can't see the ones that have deceased. Likewise, the ones who have deceased can't necessarily see demonic entities because it's a different dimension. So we're behind a veil and they're behind a veil. So a lot of the time when we start engaging the dead, what we don't realise is that something else could be engaging them. So they can reach through the dead as an invisible hand and start hanging on to the living. And this is a common problem with Ouija boards and seances and those sorts of things, because they generally go in with the understanding that they're trying to communicate with the ones that are deceased and don't see the invisible hand that's reaching through them. This can lead to obsessiveness sometimes, and in the case what I was talking about with the house cleansing, they become obsessed with who was in the house. They start going to libraries and finding out the history of the home and really engaging to try and help the ones that are deceased. What they don't realise is those ones are actually being manipulated. Those deceased souls are being manipulated by something that they can't see that then reaches through to the living. And that's where you see possession starting to set in. It's that fascination with the dead and the dead responding and then moving in further to try and assist, actually getting yourself caught into all sorts of bindings and dealing with demonic powers without seeing it originally until things start getting out of hand. And that's generally when we're called in, when things have gone from we were dealing with the dead, we were trying to assist them, to the point of now we've got paranormal stuff going in the house. The children are at times trancing out, speaking in different languages and doing all that sort of thing, is when you start to say, okay, there's something that's reached through and it's actually got a hold. So that's, yeah.
I think most people think white sage, Palo Santo, or just that basic stuff is going to clear everything. And I sort of ask people, go, well, sort of, I guess, a good clearing, but you don't know what's been here before.
Exactly.
And you don't always see that straight away until you activate it by making an action or doing something they don't like, and then the claws literally will start to come out.
Yeah, that's right. And what we see generally happening as well is because all the dimensions are frequency based. All our emotions are frequency based. All aromatherapy is frequently based. All music is frequency. So there's all different things on those things. When we do a burning of incense or a saging or what have you, we've got to bear in mind that from a spiritual perspective, this is a burnt offering. So they're actually burning something through the house, and entities that aren't the dead can actually get a further hold, because it's actually considered an offering. So it may cleanse the ones that have deceased, because this is where it can get dodgy, because you're actually changing the frequency in the house by putting a different smell in or putting a different sound in, such as the singing bowls. It changes the frequencies. But likewise, when you leave the house, the frequencies drop back down to what they were, therefore opening the door again. So it's like opening and closing a door, which is why people say, well, I've saged, I've done all of this, and it worked for a certain amount of time, then within a few days, everything started flooding back in. It's literally because from a frequency perspective, you've opened a frequency, you've closed the door, and then it's reopened again. So it can have that time factor, but generally speaking, things drop down back to the normal frequency.
So what would you say to someone if they're saying, look, I really want to know how I can avoid attachments? Obviously, we can't always avoid attachments, but what would you say the key things would be emotionally, socially, in order to maybe, avoid them or keep them at bay, or try and keep yourself at a level spiritually and emotionally that they end up going somewhere else rather than at you?
I think, generally speaking, it comes down to self-control, which is not an easy thing now in this world anyway. From an emotional level and all those sort of things, you're going to be far more susceptible if you're opening yourself up on different areas. So engaging with people and activities and that sort of thing that have more of a negative connotation or a detrimental, it actually opens a door. So if we're going in eyes wide open, then we tend to be able to guard ourselves a lot more. If we're sort of going in and we're getting into the flow of everything that's going on at the time, we open ourselves up to whatever it is. Again, it's similar to having that soul tie with someone.
Yeah.
So being that little bit more aware of what can happen spiritually. I keep saying to people, the word spirit in Greek is actually pneuma, which means air, breath, wind, which is where we get pneumonia, pneumatic tires, pneumatic tools from. It's all air, breath, wind. Spirits are air, breath, wind. Right. So realistically, we can say that the coronavirus is a virus. It's airborne. Spirits are also airborne. Walking into an environment that is you're not guarded in, that is completely negative or can lead to negativity, generally opens us up. Unless we're going in eyes wide open and going, I'm not going to allow myself to get suckered in or get soulishly involved, get into that emotion. A lot of us now are very empathetic. When we move into a room and someone's generally feeling very depressed, we tend to go downhill ourselves. Music can do the same. When we start playing heavy metal music, we can go into a more depressive state. They found that with flowers and plants that they can actually go into dying if you play certain music and that sort of thing. So frequencies hold a amazing part of our spirituality. So keeping ourselves, as I say, the self-control when we get angry or we get depressed, which is all human emotions, if it starts to get to a point of it's going beyond the normal human. So I'm sad, but then it goes into depression and suicidal thinking, then you've got to start to realize that you've actually opened yourself up and something's come in. So it's that awareness. And again, not looking at it as, oh, this is terrible, I've got a demon, I've got to hide in the corner, this is horrible. Going, you know what, this is like a common cold. I need to go and deal with this on that level, rather than taken away with our thoughts, because spirits can speak. So they tend to speak in the eye. Once they get in, they want to exploit those emotions. So start speaking, well, I'm useless, nobody loves me, everybody hates me, and it actually brings the person right down. Because the spirit speaks in the eye, they tend to think it's their own self. Yeah. So therefore they go down further and further. They start isolating. They start to believe what they're hearing, and then things get out of control. Generally speaking, most mental illnesses, from my point of view, are coming from those sorts of things.
I totally agree with that. Totally. I think a lot of people are becoming more attuned to the spiritual world more than ever. So, and I think we're opening ourselves up to a lot more things than what we realise. So, and I believe that probably 80 to 90% of our mental health problems are related exactly to what you were just saying.
Yeah, definitely, because like I was saying, a lot of entities actually feed on the emotions that they that they exploit. For example, if you're looking at something that's more of a fiery elemental type spirit, it's actually going to feed on emotions of anger or passion or lust or those fiery type emotions. So as soon as we're going into that and it goes from being love to lust and becomes quite obsessive, then we can see that something's moved in. If you try and eradicate a fiery type elemental spirit with sage, you're actually feeding it because it's a smoke offering. So it can actually heighten that in the house. It may deal with the ones that are deceased, but it certainly won't deal with the demonic power.
Yeah.
Which is why in biblical times God actually said no more of these burnt offerings, because it was starting to be offered up to other gods, which opened the doors to them, which we were warned not to do. So yeah, it's a matter of being aware and keeping ourselves. And unfortunately, because there's been a lot of people who are going into spirituality, they get not conned, but they sort of go with a practice that seems to work. They go with it, and even in the Catholic faith, I see the rites of exorcism. There's certain things that they do in the rites of exorcism that are actually forbidden in scriptures, but they've done it because it seems to have worked.
Yeah.
So they're doing an exorcism. A lot of the ones we see that are reenacted, if you like, in movie and that sort of thing, it usually depicts the priest as getting killed in the end or getting possessed himself in the end. These are because they're engaging in practices that they've gone into because the demon has made a reaction to that. Oftentimes they make a reaction to that to say, oh, don't do it, I really can't stand that, when actually they do want it and they want to deter them from going a certain way. So there's a lot of things there that we have to get back down to basics and go, what am I actually engaging in here, and is it wrong or is it right? We've lost our sense of intuition in that way. In a lot of ways, we tend to go with our psychic or our soulish emotion. If it feels good, do it. But we know, if I'm going to do drugs, there's going to be repercussions. It might feel good, but it doesn't have a good effect in the long run. And that can be very similar to spirituality. It can feel good for the moment because it brings in something that's foreign to us, that can give us an emotion or a heightened sense of something, but then it starts to dissolve into the system, if you like, go into the psyche and actually start to spread itself out. And the people are going, well, I need to get that fix again, and they go into the practice again, and the more they do it, the more they're actually allowing for something to take over their soul. So there's so many things in spirituality, and with attachments, there's so many things.
I think from a basic perspective, if I was to walk into a shop that you own today and I said, look, I just wanted a few little things to keep me on track for my home or for myself, what would be the 3 or 4 different tools that you would give them to take away with them?
Basically, I think people have got to get back to a self-love. We're looking at a world where there's not a lot of that. A lot of mental illnesses, a lot of the problems we have is because people don't actually love themselves anymore. When I'm talking about that, I'm not talking about the egotistical, I'm above everyone. That generally just, I'm okay. Getting that general love. I like to say keep it simple. So the KISS strategy is best. People get tied up in all the different routines and rituals, and take it from me, I was raised in that. It just keeps adding things. Having to do a ritualistic chore of the sage or the singing bowls through the house or this, that, or the other, it actually ties you into a ritualistic behaviour. I think getting back to that self-control, loving self, loving each other. Actually, I like to keep it simple, go straight to the highest force. I often say to people, if there's something wrong, if you have a car that's a Ford, you're not going to go to Holden for parts. You're going to go to the original manufacturer. So I like to go to God the Father and say, well, you made me. Okay.
Yep.
The issue a lot of people have with that is that we don't have the truth of what parents are anymore. You know, the loving father can be a very, very hard thing for people, especially if they've come from an abusive situation where dad hasn't been good or men have abused. They tend to disregard God, going, well, he's man. But we've got to bear in mind that he's a sovereign being that has, he's not a human. So therefore he's higher. He has made us. He has a genuine parts. He has a genuine love for us. He's not foreign to our psyche, our makeup. So therefore he's coming from a perspective of, I made you, I know which parts to use to fix you. A lot of us go into spirituality for healing, for those sorts of things, because we need something, there's something lacking. So we go into areas that are supposed to fulfill those things and find ourselves stuck in this pattern of keep going looking for more, keep going looking for more, and never actually finding it. But I don't